We are live. That happened quickly. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Self-Help Bookshelf, where we talk about personal growth strategies to help you find your highest self. And today we're going to talk about hypersensitive and hyposensitive. And Rory.
Thanks, Kay. Look, yes, it's one of my. I love this topic, and if you're here and interested in this topic, we're going to delve into all these intricacies of sensitivities and hypersensitivities. And if you are interested in this or want to help it share around, then give it a like. And if you've watched one of our videos before, give it a subscribe so you catch up for more and questions and highlights and anything that you get from this is a learning process. If you like it, then it and you think of it, put it in the comments because it not only as soon as you recognize it and you put it in the comments and you typing it reinforces the way to lay down those memories for yourself so you remember it for later as well.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Yes, so definitely liking, subscribing, all of that supporting us to support you and others. So I'm Kay Reeve. I'm an emotional awareness expert. For anyone who hasn't watched before, I like working with parents of teenagers and young adults, whether it's teachers, therapists, coaches, mentors, leaders, managers as well, and anywhere where we can support our next generation with emotional awareness. And Rory, do you want to introduce yourself before we begin? We've got a lot to talk about today as well.
Uh, yeah, thank you. My name is Rory, go by Rory Lemonade, AID to help online, and I help those that are wanting to get their projects out there but feel scattered or they're sabotaging in some way. And it's potentially neurodivergent struggles, and it's really channeling that energy, going from the negatives to the positives, getting the projects out there that really will help inspire the world with creativity for mental health.
Fantastic. Yes. And we missed last week's because we had a different event on Monday evening and we were doing another joint workshop. And you know what? That is the first episode we have missed in 6 months. We have actually done 25 episodes before today. I think we need to give ourselves a round of applause for that, and you can join us as well. So 25 episodes completed to date. This is number 26. Not that we were counting, but I just had a quick glance back this evening. So yes, 6th of January, we started this 2025. But yes, it's been incredible because we started with an intention of talking about personal growth strategies. And there's lots of things we've talked about so far in terms of things like circle of influence and comfort zones and lots of other strategies. But in recent weeks, we've kind of started to cover a bit more about some of the neurodivergent topics. And hypo and hypersensitivity is something that comes up a lot. However, it also exists in people who are not neurodivergent, and it may be just one aspect of one sense that is different for each individual. And we figured that this is a great way to bring it into the whole personal development topic, because when we have something that is outside of the standard norm, and that's not to say being outside of it is not normal, but outside of the standard sort of central gauge of things, when we're either one way or the other, this can actually affect our lives and our processes and our relationships and our jobs. And especially when we're not in something that aligns with our values, with our skills and strengths, and it is pushing us where we've got weaknesses. So we figured this would be a great topic to bring in terms of, and certainly the last two conversations we've had have been about neurodiversity and labels and how we can look at a lot more of our strengths and weaknesses to find our place in the world. And this is another aspect of that conversation that just seems to naturally lead off the back of that. Now, I know from my example experience over the years, it took me a long while to realize that certain parts of me were hypersensitivities. Hyposensitivity, I'm not sure if I've got hypo, but when we're talking hyper and hypo is very much like when we're talking about blood sugar levels. Hyper is high, or like hyperactive means overly active, and it's elevated levels of whatever the sense is that's being affected. Now, I'm very hypersensitive in my skin, and I'm a very itchy person. I don't have any diseases, I don't have nits, but I'm always scratching because the slightest bit of breeze on my skin or something just makes me feel itchy. And that is hypersensitivity. And when my glasses slide. So for me, I've been aware of it kind of for years, but I hadn't labeled that as hypersensitive. But I knew that I was highly sensitive, versus there are some other people who are very hypo, and their skin, you could go up and touch their skin and they'd probably not even be aware of it. They blanked you out. You think they're blanking you out. And I know certainly when I was married, for example, I was very hypersensitive to touch, and particularly when I go to the dentist. Could not bear the cold air even. It's like, if you're going to put cold air on my teeth, numb it first, you know. My teeth used to be very, very sensitive. So a lot of people who are not neurodivergent can probably relate to the concept of sensitive teeth. While my husband, on the other hand, could go to the dentist and have a complete filling and not even have an injection. He was the total opposite to me. Now, I could get an itch or a bug or something land on me, and I knew exactly where it was, or a pain, and I could pinpoint it. Whereas for him, he'd say, "Oh, I've got a bad back." And I'd say, "Was it upper or lower?" He said, "I don't know, it's just my back hurts." Well, you must know if it's a upper back or lower back. No, can't tell. So we were the perfect example between us of hyper and hypo when it comes to the sense of touch. But then there's all the other senses as well. So I'm going to let you bring your bit in, Rory, before I go too far. But that's my intro on my experience of hyper and hyposensitivity with the touch level and sort of levels of pain and sensation. But yeah, we got a lot to cover because we got 5 senses in total. So this is going to be fun.
Well, thanks for that, Kay. It was really good to hear that description of it. And makes a lot of sense from that perspective. And um, I, as always, I like to think of things from a sort of root point of view before starting with anything more specific, just so that there's a gauge. And how, as we're born, um, uh, we have no reference of what should feel or shouldn't feel a certain way at all. It's completely blank.
Mm.
So, uh, so when you see a kid that's just starting to walk, or potentially seen a kid in the street fall over, land, and then kind of be in shock before any feelings come about, and then it's almost like they have to they suddenly realize, oh yeah, this is my cue to be upset or something like that, because they're learning how to express what they're feeling. So my point being is that whatever we experience in terms of anything here is blank, black and white. It's almost like computer on and off switches in the nerves. So it's
Right.
that binary code. It's literally on or off. There's no feeling to it. There's no color. There's no texture. There's just um electrical pulses that are either going like this or that. And so um and it can get really complicated. So, but what happens is all that data comes into the brain and then gets filtered into the emotional centers, and through the emotional centers, and then it's like projected back onto the body in various points. So the my point being is that those that are hyposensitive or have not learned that that is particularly a thing that is dangerous or needs worrying about at all. And then there are more, and it's not just mind gauging, but there's potentially other things that are going on too. As in, but it's all just goes through what's perceived. So whatever is actually happening it still has to go through the sort of manage that the you know the man the director, the producer, and the conductor of the of the film show score of the music in the mind to actually experience what is going on. So my point being around that is that with hypersensitivities, it becomes a learned pattern to protect in some way, shape, or form, and then the feelings are a pattern that is learned to make sure that it's a regulation system that for some reason learns it that way, and then the hyposensitivities will be where someone may have learnt from their parents that it was not a problem. There's no danger to these things. And of course, it goes one way or the other. If there is actual danger and it's not sensitized to the danger, then it could potentially be dangerous to actually cause actual physical damage or something, uh, or not realize that if the person can't feel something, then they may not be able to recognize why that would be upsetting for someone else as well. As so someone that is hyposensitive potentially may, in a particular situation, or may not understand how someone else could possibly feel it that way or not feel it that way.
Or
And
experience the anxiety or the fear with it. Yeah.
yeah, and the other aspect of that is the hypersensitive, those that are hypersensitive to a particular reaction, particular thing, that in itself may be again projected out to others. And it's not just about what's going on for the here, but it's what it's perceived as. So people that are hypersensitive potentially are picking up other people's
Yeah.
picking from other people's pain or accentuating that their assumptions. So some of those assumptions will be true to a point of that they may be feeling upset, but it's still an assumption that's learned through the mirror neurons to make sure that we are connecting and making sure we're looking after each other as humans. And so it was really fascinating topic, and I just yeah coming back to that sense of that it's not really a right or wrong answer to why this is occurring, other than our past experiences dictate the sensitivities, and also there's other things that I'll get into for more specifically around pain and stress as well in a bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And there's this, yeah, a lot to unpack there about learning it. And that can be right from baby early weeks. I know, for example, I've got two grandchildren who are complete opposites in somewhere, or whereas babies, they're a bit different as they're growing up. But one of them, when you picked him up, if you tipped him a little bit, he got upset very quickly. But the other one, you could pick her up and turn her all over the place and she'd just be giggling her head off. So even that internal sensation of movement, so it's not even necessarily pressure, but that internal sensation of movement was hypersensitive for one and hypo for the other, but actually created a sense of joy for her and she loved it all. And I know for me, I was very hypersensitive. Like, forget about getting me on a roller coaster, because I even now I do not like the sensation of my body just moving all different directions. For me, that is a form of hypersensitivity in itself that feels extremely unpleasant. So some people love roller coasters. So this is where, when we can take this knowledge and apply this to daily life in what serves us and what doesn't. And, nobody's forcing me to get on a roller coaster every day or any day. But there are other things in life where we might have to face up to them. And it helps to learn and understand these hypersensitivities. Certainly from my experience raising children, one of the biggest places that this affects a lot of children is in the classroom. And that is a massive one around all of the senses. And sensory moderation also fits in with this as well. So is the hypo, and the sensory moderation that sits between the two, when we can, some it's not fixed, it's shiftable. And how we can shift from one sense to another varies from person to person as well. So there's a lot to unpack here. But yeah, so that's a lot about, like you say, the touch. And that's interesting you're saying like the binary, but then there's also the level of pressure. So it's like the very sensitive touch is like, oh, it's really irritating and skin crawling. right through to the really deep pressure that's painful. So there's a whole scale of that as well. And again, some people experience that differently and feel the pain with a lot less pressure than somebody else who'd be just like, yeah, go on, keep going, keep going. So, and again, it's just learning how this affects what we do in life, because there is a lot where it can be through education, through jobs, through relationships, that this can affect us. If somebody's very touchy, crawly, doesn't, I know, for example, my son, he can't stand all the soft, gentle, creepy, crawly touch. It just sends him over the edge. And yet his daughter likes to walk up and stroke his arm, and it irritates him. So it's how to cope with moments like that as well. And there's lots we can uncover as we go through we normally try and stick to half an hour, but we'll give it a go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like what you said, um, covering all of the sort of touch parts, touchy feely parts, and
Mm.
also there's these are the other senses, isn't there? So this can basically the reason why I said it as a root thing is so that it can then be understood that it doesn't really
Oh yeah, that's
ma-
fine.
matter too much about the well, obviously it matters to the person if they are feeling uncomfortable or it's affecting them by not being able to feel things or however, yeah, you can see how whatever it is, whichever sense it is, if it's like light and someone needs to wear sunglasses all the time, um that's important. We don't want to stay under the sense of stress if we feel under threat, even if we're not actually under threat. Because if someone can be in the sunlight and not get a headache without the sunglasses, it
Mm.
doesn't. It suggests that it's not the actual light that's the problem. So, as such, so we and all these things are. Yeah. So it's really a case of recognizing that to a certain level we can't say what is possible to change until we realize we've got to look at what what is our where our safe zone is, what I call the free zone. When I talk about the lymphatic health exercises and getting moving in ways in which don't want to, but it's designed for people to not for those that to get moving with more aches and general pain and fatigue because they can move in ways because it's staying in the free zone, seeing where to build up to as a sense rather than pushing straight into something. And yes, and yes, again, some days it may be more sensitive than others, and that again is more apparent in women with their monthly cycles as well because they've got more chemicals, hormones, ways in which the body is changing and adapting and having chemicals that break down particular cells or rebuilding quickly. And so in those different states, there's the nerves get more on higher alert at the same time. So just even with that process, a natural process, you can see how and why it's sensitive or more hypersensitive in some situations, like when there's an actual physical injury and there's inflammation in an area to try to help heal. It's there to actually design to feel more sensitive so that we don't knock it and so that we it can settle down and heal. But when it gets chronic and it's not actually physical damage anymore, and for some reason it's hanging about there, that's where it's important to check to see how to get moving to clear things and sort of not have things hanging around so much. Otherwise, it could be prolonging the sensitivity.
Mm.
And obviously, it goes very extreme as well. You get into like the idea of allergies being hypersensitivity. They're called hypersensitivities as well. So in
I definitely have those.
yeah, and this is where again it's like coming back to it's not never not talking about right or wrong or discounting how someone's health condition is. it's just interesting to think of it in ways in which to go, well, if that's a sensitivity that I have or a lack of sensitivity that I have, what's possible to change is that gets to be the curious thing, because just because the healthcare system, with all its great things to do with emergencies and managing health in a very technical way, but to the things it knows how to do, when it says it doesn't know how to do it, just sort of says that's it. It's just the way it is, and that and health and healing. It just, if it was just the way it is, then we would damage ourselves and we would not be able to heal from it. So if we can physically repair, then it could be the same for how we would treat our sensitivities, treat the way we feel about things, and we could potentially relearn some things by looking into it. So I'll go off on a tangent about that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's that's what I think is important to recognize is like, yeah, there are extreme reactions, and it's that one last piece before I pass it over, because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. But the the adrenaline and cortisol and spikes of from the stress behind worrying about a situation of a sensitivity reaction is like a it's a painkiller at the time. So adrenaline is a painkiller at the time of the reaction and actually that's what can calm things down and get things moving and shifting and changing. But the rest is just as important to clear that and calm it down, because the pain, if the adrenaline's and cortisol's up for a long time, over a period of time, it can actually be making the nerves more sensitive because they're less sensitive for a bit, and then they can become sensitive too. So So when I used to see a lot more patients, it would be I'd ask people like have you, they come in and go, oh, yeah, I never really felt this pain before, and it's come on and it's sort of a bit chronic, but it's not obvious. And I'd go, what I'd ask about the stress levels and how long someone had been under, if they'd been under pressure or their stress levels have been in the last 6 months. And I said, yeah, and there's a pattern to, yes, I I've been like stressed for the last 3 months, and I'm just starting to come down from something, and that's when they start to have more pain, when with less stress, because they've been riding a sort of a hyposensitivity of it, so that suddenly suddenly what was n more numb, and then you take away that that chemical that was numbing it,
Like
and
when the painkillers wear off.
yeah, painkillers wear off, and then the same pressure makes them more sensitive. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because yeah, I mean, the adrenaline. I love what you're saying about adrenaline because that is like a natural painkiller in some sense, and so is the dopamine as well. In when people are happy, they're in less pain. It's like a distraction from the pain. So they are like natural painkillers. But yeah, that moment when the painkillers wear off, or you forget to be happy, you're like, oh, it really hurts again. So that is that form of sensitivity. And I liked also what you were saying about the free range of movement because again with the whole scale of hyper to hypo there is this comfort range, there's a stretch range, and then there's like the extreme range of sensitivities. And so we've talked about touch quite a bit there and a bit about light, but as well as talking about pressure there's also heat and cold, isn't there, as well? So there's more than just touch. There is different senses involved with, like there's the very sensitive gentle like hairs moving, right through to pain, and then there is heat and cold sensitivity as well. And some people are much more sensitive to the heat or the cold than others. Again, I know I'm very sensitive to cold. I don't like cold. And some people like cold. Like I know, Rory, you love your cold water bathing and cold showering and whatever. And for me, that's a total avoidance. But again, it's finding out where you can fit comfortably and challenge it just a little. But when you're coming on to light as well, light definitely a sensitivity. And I certainly know for children in school, that can be an issue when you've got sunlight streaming in. It could also be too much colour, overwhelm of too much bright colours, and it's not calming and soothing enough. So light in itself, and I know certainly for me, all my life, I mean, every time I've told an optician about this, they just completely dismiss it. But all my adult life, I've always driven the car with my sun visor down, even in winter, because just having the sky visible makes my eyes hurt. And I don't know why, but I am hypersensitive to the sky, the light from the sky. And I have to just shade that off so I can see the road, the trees, the buildings, but I always have to put the sunshade down, even in winter. And I know I've got one of my grandchildren very hypersensitive to light as well. Cannot bear anything bright, like a light going on suddenly, it's overwhelming. Whereas some people are the opposite and they need that sensory input of light of different colours. They need more bright sunlight and they need to be outdoors. So it's looking at which end of the spectrum or which end of the scale you find yourself leaning towards and embracing that, and not trying to fight against it in a way that is a deficit to you. But also when people are helping children in classroom, and it could also be people at work, you know, is their desk somewhere where they're facing a window, you know, and it's south facing, when they can't bear bright lights, would they be better off with their back to the window or somewhere in a shadier corner of an office versus somebody who's a sun lover? So this is where we can start to look at how the hypersensitive and hyposensitive can help create a more inclusive work environment or school environment. And then we've got some amazing things that go on with the sense of smell. I mean, sound is very similar, isn't it, with distractions? That's the other one. Before we go on to smell, that's an interesting one. Sound is, you know, people who, it's almost like super hearing versus partial deafness, but it's not inclusive of deafness at all. So hypersensitivity to sound is, again, like for me, I'm trying to focus, and it's like every car that goes past is like this distraction, or every noise that goes on in the background. And it's like I find it difficult to retain focus on what I'm doing when there's other noises going on, which is why I focus much better like this time of night onwards through till about midnight, when the world has gone a little quieter and I'm less distracted. I can actually do some of my best work later in the evenings. Trying to work in the morning is much more difficult for me. So for me, working at home and being aware of that gives me the ability to work with it and not fight against it, so that I can be more productive and not burn myself out by working at times of the day that don't suit me. So there's lots of things like this where we can start to look at how it serves you or how you can support others in a way it serves them at work or school or at home. And again, at home, it could be, especially when we talk about sensitive to light, there's a big thing about this been going around TikTok this year, about when you walk in the room and put a light on, if somebody is neurodivergent and they're hypersensitive to light, that can be quite overwhelming and stressful, only for moments, but it's still a stress factor. And it could be as simple as saying, right, 5-second warning, I'm going to put the light on, or 2-second warning, I'm about to put the light on. And it's as simple as that. It gives them time to quickly shut their eyes or look down or shield. So it's not such a sudden onslaught and like this painful in the eye bright light. And they've got a chance to sort of close down for a moment and then gradually adapt back up to the new light level. So this is what we mean about working with it, not healing it, not changing it, but working with it as an individual, so you know yourself, but also when you are in relationships with others, working with others and supporting others as well. So I'm going to hand back to you for a minute, Rory, and then we can keep going from here.
Yeah,
There's still loads more to cover.
thanks for bringing all that in. Yeah, really important to remember that. And it reminds me of the frog in the pan of water thing, scientific experiment where dropping a frog into the hot water, boiling water, it's going to jump straight out. Its nervous system is preloaded, ready to react to that. And that reaction to a frog, they don't have the the you
Yeah.
know,
It's going to
the
be a challenge to see if you can bring him into the conversation every time, isn't it?
what's that?
The frog.
The frog
Yeah, he comes in every episode. We're going to challenge you now to see how you can fit that in every time.
every time. I don't remember saying it every time. Yeah,
That's all right.
but
I like
yeah,
the story.
and then when the frog is in the water and it's heated slowly over time, it doesn't recognize. And so that's the potential example of where the hyposensitive person is it's not learned, it's not had the life of um the person's not had the life of that being a dangerous thing, and they don't notice it as much for some reason, and yet the person that where it changes, even just what's a sudden change can be a small sudden change feels like a big sudden change. And one way round of potentially managing that is to see, obviously there's unexpected things that just happen, but there's also ways to potentially use things to like a dimmer switch on a light rather than doing things, changing the environments slower, or
You mean
or
like acclimatizing?
yeah,
Mm.
having a precursor to the change, like you said. That's having a pre-warning that it's something's going to change, and all that kind of stuff if it's really extreme. Um, Secondly, you mentioned about me liking the cold showers. Yes, I like them. My nervous system still, I can sense the apprehension of it, but I've learned to reassociate the feeling after of it and during has got better. And I kind of enjoy it, but it's I preloaded the idea that it was going to be useful for me by doing the research, and then that's where I have learned that to discipline myself to do things. So it's not necessarily that I love it as such as something that I think of. I do now, but yeah, it's fascinating that I wouldn't have naturally chosen to do that, and I thought it was crazy, absolutely crazy. Why would someone do that? Um, and I remember first trying it when I was like 27 or something, when I heard to try a cold shower, and I just did it, and it was like that was mental, and I didn't do it again for ages until I really decided that it or heard more about the benefits of it. So yeah,
Mm.
it is fascinating. It's not it's a sort of it's a kind of I encourage like the ideas of wherever there is a sensitivity. I mean, that is really the whole premise of vaccines, is to introduce the idea to the nervous system and the immune system of the thing in such a small dose that it can adapt and acquire a reaction to it. That's a really extreme example. Um,
Good
why
enough.
they potentially work in normal situations. So
Yeah.
it uh so that's where I like always like to remind people, encourage them that the reason why they potentially are sensitive to it is because that's the signal to say that's where they could train themselves in so that they don't have that problem anymore, because then they can actually learn to um I can feel it can be in very hot environments and very cold environments now, and I just feel it as a sense, but I don't have the attachment into the brain that says I'm in danger, because the I'm in danger piece to the feeling of the sensitivity is the bit that makes it feel uncomfortable, extreme.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like very fascinating to look at what is possible to introduce. Where are the gaps? Where are the peaks or the troughs in those sensitivities or lack of sensitivities? And where is it if it's affecting someone's life or the people around them, for instance, through overreacting or underreacting to things? And look, because then it also comes back down to thinking about hyposensitivity and how it links to our personality type. And And so where again that reaction, if there's an overreaction to something, it's yes, it's not to make someone wrong about the fact that they feel upset. However, that person, it's important to also recognize that if they can look at how to change it, it may help them to actually have better relationships so that it's not so challenging for the people around them as well as an idea. So and again for the undersensitives, and not being able to understand why someone would be reacting and they're not, that's again another line of inquiry to work out how to appreciate things from an outer perspective as well, an inner perspective, inner sensitivity and outer. Yeah. So I said a lot, and um,
It's all good. Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
One last bit to that. So I mentioned personality types to notice, like overly supportives. What do you want? What do you want? Kind of thing can overcook into um overreacting to what other people may think of them, or feeling the pleasing and things like that. And also the hyposensitive personality may be that they don't see why someone would be upset, and or hyper rational, extra rational controller, assertive. They're assertive about what they want because that's potentially they can't sense what someone else or understand what someone else is feeling. So,
Mm.
those are all fascinating topics too.
Yeah, and I suppose when you're saying that, that ties in, and I'd not thought about this, but as you're saying it, it's like this light bulb going off in here that our personality type reactions are almost like a hyper or hyposensitivity to our hormonal chemistry. Like some people will have a little bit of a shock and they'll get really angry, and others will have a shock and they'll go off and cry, and others will get a real shock and then they'll just either shut down or burst out laughing, because we all have a different hormonal chemical reaction in a moment. And that was one of the things we were talking about on this workshop that we did last Monday evening, was how, because we had a professor doctor who's a guest speaker for me that night, and he was saying how when you have a thought in the brain, that brain sends signals out to your body through the nervous system, and that signal triggers off hormonal reactions in the glands all over the body. But that signal travels at up to 80 meters a second. So it literally is that quick. You think something and your body is producing the hormones and then reacting to that. So people who are very fearful of perhaps having a really negative reaction to the cortisol versus the adrenaline when they get really angry very quickly. So our body is having these reactions all the time. But those thoughts and feelings that come in, and whatever it is that triggers something for us, is usually through the five senses: what we see, hear, smell, touch, and taste, in whatever forms. So all of that does tie in together: what we think, what we feel, how that links to things we've seen, heard, touched, taste, smell. And for example, if you smell rotten eggs, you're going to have a really negative reaction quite quickly and want to run. And where you said about danger, and our senses are trying to keep us safe. But when we are having an overreaction to, it's not an overreaction, but when we're having an extremely sensitive reaction to one of the senses, that was interesting, like what you were saying about the cold water. Now, for me, there are some things which I do associate with a sense of danger, especially around the allergies, because it keeps me safe and keeps me breathing, where potentially I could lose a lot of my breathing function. So there is a lot of things around sense of smell. I've learned to have a hyper sense of smell for some things that I know I have to avoid. Otherwise, I could end up in hospital not breathing properly in the past. Whereas the cold water shower for me is not so much a sense of danger, but a sense of unpleasantness. And the movement on a roller coaster to me is like links more with danger, where other things might be more unpleasant sensations. So I think other ones to recognize where it feels dangerous and where it feels unpleasant, and which ones you need to challenge or want to challenge or feel like you don't need to challenge at all, because you don't have to challenge them all. Some of them, it could be learning to work with them. So yeah, it's quite interesting because I have this what I call a really random superpower. And that's when we're moving into sense of smell. Because I've been chronic asthmatic up until about the age of 40, and I'm still asthmatic, but I was really chronic, that being near an allergen literally within a few minutes could have me being taken to hospital and being put on a nebulizer. And it could be very rapid. And I'd be, in fact, on one occasion, for anybody who doesn't understand asthma, my asthma attack was so severe that when you have an asthma attack, you can breathe in, but it's very difficult to breathe out. So as you keep breathing in and can't breathe out, and then you breathe in and can't breathe out, your lungs inflate to a point that's really painful across the back. But then because you still can't breathe out, what you're not doing is expelling all of the old oxygen air or the old air, and you're not getting fresh oxygen in. So your oxygen levels really drop because you can't expel all that carbon dioxide and all the other gases. And so I'm sitting in the passenger car on the way to hospital, not able to breathe out, but knowing I needed to get more air in. So I was actually doing the Heimlich maneuver on myself in the passenger seat as much as I could to be able to get a fraction of a breath each time until we could get to the hospital. And there was a 4-hour queue in A&E, and I skipped the queue because you go in on airway, breathing, circulation. Well, my airway was clear, but I wasn't breathing properly. And I was treated very urgently that day. It was very severe. But because there have been so many triggers over the years, so I've learned to detect them through sense of smell. And this is a really random one. I can walk into any room and I've done this, people can be sitting there like there is nothing wrong. Like they do not notice this. And even after I highlight it, they do not notice it. But I notice it. I can walk into a room and 20 feet away, I can tell you if there's a moldy bit of fruit, like an orange. For some reason or other, I can walk in a room and I detect oranges. And for me, the smell is so overpowering that I cannot stay in that room until it is removed. And the fruit bowl or whatever it was in is cleaned out and the windows are opened, and then I can go back in the room. And it really is. It's like, imagine somebody cracking a rotten egg in front of you, how overpowering that is. And to me, that's equally how overpowering the sense for moldy oranges. And other people would just sit in the room with it and not notice. So that's an extreme example of when we're talking about hypersensitivity. And when you're saying it learned, yes, I have learned. And that's not the only thing I can smell at that level, but it's the most extreme one for me that I have learned to smell over time to avoid the fact that I'm triggered by molds and musts.
Mhm.
It's the most random thing that I can smell moldy oranges from 20 feet away.
Awesome. Amazing,
Oh,
amazing,
I'm sorry.
amazing. That's amazing.
Random.
Amazing, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
amazing you're
most
able
random thing, but
for
yeah.
it to happen. It's amazing that it happens, that we can learn these things in order to um protect, survive, and all those same things, really. Um, I yeah, it's it's like the fact that we can heal, a paper cut will heal over in 6 days, and it's all the same understandings really to just go, well, if there is a hypersensitive or hypersensitivity is affecting life, remembering what is truly life threatening, what is actually, like you just said, what is actually life threatening, and what is uncomfortability levels, and where or not, if we train one area to get less sensitive in what is called pacing or graded, graded motor imagery is one way of helping reassociate pain signals, pain associations in the brain, because again, it's all black and white. So it's only in the brain that will project an image of the pain in that area. And so that's why you can have phantom limb pain, and there's no
Yeah.
actual limb there. So, and yet it can be sensed in that exact spot where there would be a hand. So, so it's just fascinating, and it's just an encouragement to say, well, if it can be learned that way, then it can also be a something that can be looked at to help. And if it's not just a case of changing the sensitivity, it could actually help change the brain in multiple ways, uh, and even help with the cold showers. It also helps a contraction thing. So the skin, the nervous system, the circulation, and move things around the body as well. So that's another one that's why it's so popular for other people too. It's another way to look at shifting and helping the healing processes of the body too.
Yeah, so I like that idea that, when you do decide to challenge this in either way, you can learn to either increase sensitivity or decrease it, swapping from like no awareness to awareness, or from danger down to pleasure, sort of bring it almost down to a pleasure level or an acceptance level if you don't necessarily want to go as far as pleasure. And I suppose there are a lot of people also that learn to go from pain being hypersensitive to pain being a form of pleasure. We know we're not going to go into those kind of conversations too far, but we know a lot of that can lead to. There are a lot of people who do take pain to a pleasure level. And I know my son, for example, there's a lot of things where he gets hurt and he just laughs it off. He has learned over the years. But again, when he was in that cortisol stress state, the slightest things he'd be going, oh, that really hurt. But then when he's in an adrenaline state, he'll laugh pain off. And that's something that happened a lot as he went through his teen years. But there's so much here, and it is about learning as well how that suits us. So for example, I didn't like lots of movement, and I don't like lots of bright lights. So for me, working in an office was ideal, where I haven't got to put up with too many senses of smell either, because being asthmatic and highly tuned sense of smell, it was quite difficult for me to work in places that involve lots of chemicals or dust or anything like that. So for me, it was then working in environments that suited me. Factories were pretty good as well because they're quite clean, lots of air conditioning, good air, quality air in factories, depending on what kind of factories, of course. So there were lots of places where I could work that suited me, where for somebody else, they might not like that office environment because the constant buzz and noise going on is overwhelming, and they prefer to work somewhere more solo or outdoors away from people. And I'm sure there are so many examples we could come up with where it suits different people. But the one we could haven't covered yet, Rory, is the sensory moderation. And an example of this I always like to use, especially when I'm helping parents understand children in school environment with the sensory moderation, is an example of in a party. And some people go, oh my goodness, I don't get this. It's never happened to me. But a neurotypical person in a party or a business network or in a room full of people will be able to kind of filter out all of the background noise. Even though they can hear it, they can kind of take their focus away from it and focus on a conversation with one person in front of them and hear everything that person says. And even though they can hear all the rest of it, they can ignore it in a sense. But in the midst of all that, if somebody shouts out your name across the room, your senses will moderate round to go, oh yeah, who called me? And have a quick sort of shouting match friendly across the room with that other person. And then you go back to the conversation you were on, and you can adapt your senses to those needs while still filtering all the rest out, even though the noise is there. Now, especially for somebody on the autistic spectrum, and I'm sure Rory probably experiences a lot of this as well, is for a lot of autistic people in particular, as well as those with ADHD and probably others as well, they're unable to create that filter effect. So if you're in a room and you cannot filter down to one conversation and you hear all of the noise all of the time and cannot adapt from it, that is a lack of ability to moderate the senses. Now, one of the ways this played out a lot for me with seeing my son was in front of the television. That a lot of the time he couldn't shut noise out in the classroom, and the classroom was overwhelming, and they're meant to sit and focus on the work, but he could not, he was too distracted by the child next to him rubbing the work out, the light coming in the windows, too many bright colours, the sound of other children doing stuff and feet shuffling, the teacher walking around, so you've got that movement as well. And he couldn't moderate his senses to be able to shut down and focus on his work. Now, on the other end, on the rare occasion that he could, or when the telly was on and he did actually get his focus into something, that's when we go into the hyper focus level. So this is the opposite end, where they focus on something so intently that they completely shut everything else out. And I know I can do this sometimes when I'm working. When I do get into hyper focus, and we kind of almost generate this on purpose through flow states to be able to create some of our most productive work. But with a child with hyperfocus, they're watching that telly and all of a sudden the rest of the world does not exist. Now, as a mom, I'm shouting my son, Matthew, time for dinner. Matthew, got to turn the telly off. Matthew, time for this. And as parents, it's easy to think they're ignoring us and being naughty, when the reality of it was he actually hadn't heard me, even though I'm almost shouting across the room. And then it's like this sensitivity level suddenly kicks in that he can hear me, but by this time I'm at shouting level, like, come on, you turn that telly off, you're not listening to me. And all of a sudden he's gone from not hearing me to hearing me shouting. And I felt awful when I realized this is what I'd been going through, and it made him jump. And then we've got the tears because there's the reaction to suddenly there's an excessive level of noise that distracts him. And when I realized this, it helped me find other ways. I knew he was about 8 or 9 before I learned this. And it helped me find other ways to get that sensory moderation back, such as walking around where he could see me. So I'd got the visual distraction and then going, Matthew, it's time to turn the telly off in 2 minutes, and giving him a warning, not just sudden. So it was just, or perhaps just go and gently put my hand on his shoulder and say 2-minute warning, telly off. And it was learning to work with him and his sensory moderation rather than triggering it. And that was a big step forward for us when we understood that. And that was the same with the sight, the sound. And if he was trying to work and there's background noises, what could I do to help settle those noises? And for some children, that could be with that is laminate flooring and dogs clicking around while the children are doing the homework or something. That can be enough to just stop them being able to focus. So it might be letting the dog out in the garden or something for half an hour, or putting them in the other room. So it's looking at all of those distractions and how can we help make life a little easier for them. And the same at work, same whatever we're doing, personally supporting. But I'm going off on all kind of rabbit holes here. But to me, this is all relevant to this hyper and hypo, is we don't all necessarily experience all one end. We can go from one end to the other end, but not necessarily go gradually through the middle. It can be a sudden switch and then sudden switch back. And that's when the reactivity comes in. And parents definitely had to work around that, support my son and other friends over the years and colleagues. And so it's been a big one.
Awesome. Yeah. That was a really good thing to bring up. I think it's very valid and very part of it all. The only last thing I would probably add into this is the idea of, I think I've mentioned it to you before, which is that there's this, what the learned patterns are about what's going on, the senses, feedback, emotional centers, triggers, all those kind of things. And then there's the sense of where the blood has gone in the brain more chronically. And we're talking, when I say chronically, I don't mean over months. I'm talking in the moment. If you're talking about a sense of over time, I could be hyperfixating on something uh and I've been charged up, maybe breathing a bit faster, or I just, there's that sense of mental rest and active recovery processes, either getting moving up, being on the screens. It's probably affecting um, battery charge in some way, shape, or form, or blood flow going to a particular area that they're getting tired without realizing, and then that could be a more of a possible to be triggered in some way. And and a more sort of extreme version of that would be stress levels again. So feeling like um, the perceived overwhelm or of feeling like not unable to make a make the what's it when the demand feels too high for something, it that causes a psychological stress, like workload, for instance. If you think that there's too much to fit into a particular amount of time and it's got to be done and it's all perceived, that could be this sense of psychological overwhelm and stress. And so when that is tipping point into there, that's an example of before it's any external trigger or molecule or whatever it is, um, that the blood flow's gone to that area of the brain that's charged for a threat. And so that's the danger part, and so that sense that thing is that shifting the attention away from stress, the mental side of things, the mindfulness and the self-command to just be present again, just even for 2 minutes, can discharge that sensed feeling. So battery charge in the moment, as opposed to overall daily battery charge to go to sleep at the end of the day, but this mental capacity battery charge for dealing with work or dealing with things, and it actually make us get things done better, or stop us from getting to the point where we might actually be less able to be hypersensitive to a particular sensory experience purely through being charged more into the positive area of the brain rather than the stress part of the brain. So there's this idea of mental fitness battery charging the brain, mental fitness, uh, mindfulness, and charging into the area of the brain in short bursts can potentially actually keep us away from being so sensitive to that area, and then therefore building up the mental muscles to become more resilient to those things, to those sensory overwhelm. So that's the potential argument to say why mental fitness could potentially be a really useful tool for those that perceive their hypersensitivities as something that's just them, that's just stuck in the moment.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And then, yeah, I've gone blank now. There was something I was going to say then. I'm doing my usual. I've got almost to the end and it's on. But
I'll do a little dance whilst you.
yeah. And one we haven't talked so much about is the hypo as well, and especially when it comes to things like sense of smell, when you're talking about danger and perhaps not having enough of a sense of smell. And actually, it was something I sat through a presentation of somebody earlier today about being able to retrain our sense of smell by using really strong smells like garlic and lavender and citrus and things to be able to train that up. And I think there's also something that's easier to associate with people who smoke, who lose a sense of taste and a sense of smell. And there are people who have got a really strong hyper sense of smell or taste that then are great at working at places like perfumeries or food testing, where they do the very fine, subtle, like people who taste Tetley tea to make sure it's absolutely like, I wouldn't tell Tetley tea from another tea. But there are people who specifically spend the whole day just testing tea bags, and they vaporize it on the tongue almost and then spit it in a bucket and go, needs just half a gram more of this or half a gram less of that. And they really use that hypersense as a career. And there are so many ways in which we can do this. And people who are less physically hypersensitive, perhaps the people that do a lot more manual labor and they just get out there and whack into stuff and, they just take it all on board. So I think there's lots of ways in which we can learn how to use our hyper and hypo senses or retrain them. So it's fantastic today. And I still can't think what it was I was going to say a minute ago. When you were talking about, I can't rewind until after we finish recording.
Mindfulness.
Oh, mindfulness, that's it. Yes, mindfulness. yes, those 10-minute bursts or whatever of mindfulness, or could be half an hour now. I play mindfulness music most of the night, have it on in the background quietly while I sleep. But I've actually started a mindfulness channel recently. So if you visit the Self-Help Bookshelf channel from this video, and then further down our homepage, there's some links to other channels, including my channel, Rory's channel. I think I've put Emma's on. If not, I need to put Emma's on. And there is one called Copper Raindrops. So if you want to experience mindfulness and focus on the visual aspects of hypersensitivity in terms of taking in the details, or phase out and let them wash over you, I have a mindfulness channel completely free to watch. I haven't monetized it, but YouTube will stick some occasional ads in, and I have no control over that at this time. But eventually I may well do. But yeah, definitely, they're proven very popular so far. And if anyone's got children for the summer holidays and you want to introduce children to mindfulness, because that's right, you were saying about stress, and sensitivities do heighten with stress. So mindfulness is a great way to reduce that. And what I've done is a couple of those videos, the last two I've done adult mindfulness video, but in every scene, like every 20 to 30 seconds, I've hidden a little object, whether it is a bird or a butterfly or a ladybird or something. So somewhere hidden in each scene, every 20 to 30 seconds, is a little nature creature that the children can look out for, encouraging them to begin mindfulness. While as a parent, you get to sit still for 10 minutes as well. So please do go and enjoy them and share them with anybody you want. Let's survive the summer holidays this year in a positive way. So yes, happy holidays to anyone who's got the next 6 weeks with the children at home as well.
That's a good point. I've also got my alien disco workouts on my channel for guided moving and breathing uh with as long as the parents are there too, to do a little bit of a workout, get moving without having to go anywhere, and they're just silly. And
Especially if it's a day like today, we're absolutely chucked it down with rain right through until middle afternoon, and children get quite restless. So again, yeah, Osteo Ventures is Rory's channel. So again, that will be linked down on the homepage of the Self-Help Bookshelf channel, and Copper
alien,
Raindrops is there. And
alien disco workout.
yeah, yes. See Rory in his bright green glasses, and well, you can go and find out what the costume is like yourself. But that was a great initiative doing that during the lockdown. And yeah, I know my grandchildren have all tried it, and we've had a good laugh doing this, and they've really enjoyed it. It's been great, and Emma's daughter's been doing it as well, one of our other authors. So yeah, we've had a few people doing that this last year. Great fun. I enjoy doing the regular ones. So if you don't want to do the alien one, there's regular ones for adults to move and breathe. And again, that's helped me tremendously the last year. I'm no longer on a walking frame. I don't use the walking stick as much. I only when I go out long distance now, on my feet for more than sort of about half a mile. I'm up to ish now. But any further than that, I need the walking stick still. But I'm way better than I was last year, thanks to Rory's Move, Breathe, Flow, lymph jams, and they are really, really helpful, as well as being mindful in themselves. So yes, there's so much we can help you with, not just talking your ears off for an hour, which we love doing. I can't believe we've actually gone over an hour today, which is unlike us. We normally stop short, but that was a good conversation. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot more we could bring into it, but we certainly hope there's enough there today to inspire you to recognize and become aware of your hypo and hypersensitivities, or how to support a loved one or a colleague or a partner, a friend, anyone that you are around, where you can help you to understand their actions, their reactions, and help you find out how to interact with them better going forward. So thank you for another awesome conversation today, Rory.
Yeah, brilliant, Kay. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for watching. It's been the sensitivities, versus hypersensitivities, high leverage actions. And if there's any more comments, what you've got from this, just pop them there, or questions and or highlights that you've got. It's just repeating, sharing, bringing it to the top. If you like something, it's going to help someone else like it by sharing in the comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I've just remembered what that other comment was going to be. When we were talking about the reactions and hypersensitivities, was about the element of surprise, an episode we did quite a while ago. So have a look at that one as well, because that all interacts with how we react to sensitives. The element of surprise, another topic we've already done. So thank you. And we will see you all again for another High Leverage Actions podcast next Monday. And it'll be another surprise topic because we haven't planned one yet.
Yeah.
Come up with something awesome. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great week and a great start to summer holidays. See you next Monday.